Hello there. I thought I'd try the first tutorial to be a little bit ambitious to start with, because this will cover quite a lot of ground, but with a fairly fun tutorial that should be fairly easy to grasp. So what I've done is I've got here different bits and pieces. If I select the drawing layer, you'll see what I mean. I'll just turn that off. Now, we've got the beams, the head, IB, IA, nose, front, mouth, pupil, pupil, eyebrow and eyebrow. These are all individually drawn elements which I put together, and nothing else I've done. So I drew a rough first, and then for each of these individual bits I created a new drawing, labelled it and drew the relevant bit. So it's a little assemblage here. I can move each bit around and they're all separate bits and pieces. Now what I want to try and do is A, make it so that I manipulate one thing and they all move. So there's some kind of hierarchy to all this. And B, that I actually kind of get a 3D effect. So this will show us quite a lot of how the node view works and how perspective view works and top view and camera view and all this sort of stuff. So the first thing we need to do is to change the pivot points for all of these elements, i.e. this little blue thing. So because it's a sphere, well, that's the sort of look that we're trying to get here, we need to change the pivot point for that. So it's kind of in the center. And I'll do that for the head, and the IB, which is this one, has to be over here, and the IA has to be over here. What's happened to that I? That's interesting. Why is that like that? Have I pressed undo somehow? Let's get that back. Hang on, just blob of white paint in. There we go. Not quite like that. Hang on, it's Perfection Ollie turning in there. There we go. That's much nicer. This insane, slightly John Kay face. Right. Pupil B. So change the pivot point to there. Pupil A. Change it to there. Eyebrow B. Put it there. So we have a sort of hinge. And eyebrow A. Put there. I think that's everything. On the mouth. Sorry. Mouth I'll put there, because if I shrink and enlarge it, I want it to be from that point. Nose, front, doesn't really matter about there. I'd say actually, just in case he was sniffing, then it would be sniff, sniff, up and down. IA, IB, yeah, lovely. The reason I do it at the base there is because if you wanted to blink and you wanted to get an extra little bit of bounce out of them, you can sort of do that. So the pivot point being there allows you to do a few fun things. If it was in the center, you can get a different sort of effect. Right, so we've got that sort of thing going on, and we've got all our pivot points set up. Now the first thing we need to do is go here, and we'll go to the node view, and we'll select all the nodes, and we'll select this button, Order Node View Up. Default values are fine, and it fans them out in this rather pleasing manner. Now, what I want to do, first of all, because I'm going to animate this in a particular way, I'm going to select all of these bits and pieces, the blue bits, not the composite or the write or display, and I'm going to select this button, and I'm going to say use embedded pivot on parent peg, because we're going to create some pegs for these in a bit. So we don't want to move these using just the drawings. We want to move them via the peg, not the drawing. We don't want to have two sort of pivots moving independently from each other. We want them to be unified, and we want it to be through a peg, which we're about to sign. And we're going to turn off the ability to animate any of these things. And that way I can only animate them through the peg which I'm about to create, i.e. this. Selected them all, peg, and it's created a peg for every single one. If we go back to the node view, you see these green things, and I select everything and press the same button there. We get pegs for every single element. Now, what we need to do is start establishing some kind of hierarchy, because at the moment what we've got is still independent elements. There's no sense of I want to grab that and the entire head moves around. I want to be able to move things. So we've got to find the sort of main head honcho of all of this, and I would say that everything comes from the head. So we'll move that to the top there. You don't need to worry too much about all of this. Just figure out that these are all being plugged into what's known as a composite, which is a sort of, I suppose, how could you describe it? It's like a pin board. Imagine that all of these individual drawings and their pegs are connected to, they're sort of unified via a pin board here. And then these are displayed, and the right, well, we don't really need to go into that, but if we have a look at, if we have a look at the contents of the composite here, I'll just increase the resolution a bit. There we are, and just make it a bit bigger. There we go. You'll see the end result of this composite. If I took one of these out of the composite, ping, it goes. So we plug it back in and it goes there. Also, we can change the order. So if I want, let me say, if I wanted the beams to be on the top, ping, they're now on the top, because this is the top and this is the bottom. That's the way it's arranged on a composite. So I'll just plug that back into the base. And I want to start moving things around so that things plug into each other. Now you always plug into the peg rather than the drawing, because this is the thing that drives the rest. I'll show you what I mean. Let's say the head drives the eyebrows. Move the eyebrows over here. Oops, pupil over there. And it drives the pupils. Oops. And it drives the mouth, drives the nose, drives the eyes, and then it drives the beams as well. So everything is controlled via this master peg. So now when I click the head, it moves everything. See what I mean? Before it only moved the head part, the circle. Now it moves everything. However, we want to create little mini hierarchies within that. Say, for example, I move the eye. I want this and possibly the eyebrow as well to move whenever I select the eye. So what I'll do is I go to the eye, move them over here, and IA will be the parent of eyebrow A and pupil A. See what I mean? So now we've got this little structure appearing. Let's move that over here. And IB will drive the eyebrow and the pupil. Let's move these over here as well. So we've got a little cluster of things going on here. So now when I select this, it moves these, but I can move that independently because it's kind of like parent-child. The parent moves the child, but the child doesn't move the parent. See what I mean? So that's how it all works, and we've got our little eyebrows as well. So we've got that, and we've got a kind of organisation going on here. It's not too bad. I'll just zoom out a little bit. We've got the mouth, we've got the nose, the head is its own little king at the top, and the beams are sort of at the back, kind of its hair. Now, just to make things extra clear in here, I'm going to select groupings of stuff, and I'm going to click on this icon here and says insert backdrop, and then it just allows us to sort of clump things together. Oops. Just so that it's extra easy on the eye. And we know what's going on. These are their own little things, so we don't need to worry about that too much. So this is IA, and this is IB. And we can change the colour as well if we want to, make them orange or whatever. But let's stick to red eyes. Same type of red, please. Thank you. There we go. So now we can sort of move things around in the node view and see what we've got a lot easier. See? Now, what I want to do for this particular task is I want to create a system whereby these individual layers are manipulated in 3D space. Now this isn't something that comes up very often, it's quite advanced, but it will give you a really good understanding of how the node view works and how things sort of work within it. So at the moment these things are organized in a kind of layering system. So if I click in individual bits of it, you see this thick dark line that appears. The nose is behind the mouth, and the mouth is behind the pupil, and blah 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 blah. Now this can be changed during the animation or before the animation, whatever, but this is the first point of call, the composite order. So what I want to do is create a clump. If I wanted to create, if I wanted to select all of the facial features, there's not really anything I can click on that allows me to do that easily, because they're all kind of democratically organized except for the head. The head is the only thing that allows me to manipulate everything. I need a kind of parent of the entire facial features. I want to be able to click that, and that without holding shift every time. How do I do that? Because to save time and make life easy for myself, and also to be able to animate in a certain way. So what I can do is I can't just join them up to a peg, because the thing about a peg is that it requires you to have a drawing underneath it in order for you to click. You could have a peg, but you would have to select it in this rather messy clump of it's like where do I click? You want it here, you want it visible. So what I'll do is I'll create at the very top, I'll create another drawing, and this time I'll call it facial features. Oops. Helps if I spell it correctly. And I'll say VPEG, meaning visual peg. It doesn't mean anything, but it helps me understand that this is slightly different to a normal drawing. And on this layer, I'm going to create a new color here and call it rig. You can call it anything you like again. I'm going to select a really insanely vivid color, and I'm going to just paint a blob of this rig there. And I'm going to use the eraser tool to make a little face. The reason I'm doing it this way is because I want to be able to get hold of this just by tapping it. And at the moment the pivot's there, I can move it to somewhere a bit more helpful, like there. And what I'm going to do is say, where's the facial features? It's over here. I'm going to say that this is now connected to the head, so this moves in relation to the head, like I've just done. If I disconnected that, it wouldn't. So it moves in relation to the head, but instead of everything connected directly to the head, it connects via this facial features drawing. So eyes connected to the facial features, the mouth connected to it, the nose connected to it, the beams connected to it. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And so now when I select it, oops, I don't want to select the beams. What am I doing? Silly, silly man. I'm able to move the face independently. See? So instant, I'm just able to go click and it's done. Fantastic stuff. And I'm able to animate that layer. So I'm able to animate the movement of that, and I'm able to animate the movement of that independently. So all these lovely things. Now, let's collapse all the layering out of that. And I need one more thing to unify the entire thing. So at the moment, I've got nothing to actually grab hold of everything except doing that. I need one more thing. So again, another visual peg. Go into there, create another thing, call it sun, because it's the entire thing. Yeah, all right, VPEG if I must. VPEG. Yeah, helps to spell properly, Ollie. There we go. Just move that over here. That'll be the king of the castle at the very top. And I'm just going to paint, just going to move that over a bit. I'm just going to paint the word sun in this vivid colour. And when I select it at the moment, it's not doing anything, of course, because I need to connect that to the head and the beams. Come on, you can do it. There we go. So now when I select the sun, all of it moves. So that's my sort of overall thing. Now, just for the purposes of this demo, I'm also going to create a color card, and I'm going to lock that so I don't accidentally turn it on. I'm going to give it a slightly different color, so I don't know, make it the sky. In fact, that would help. There we go. So I've got my color card, and I'm going to do something else as well, just to make sure that you understand that these pink elements don't render. Both the V-pegs I want to be quite high up on this composite. So what I'm going to do, and because I want them to always float above the animated elements on here. So what I'm going to do is go to the node library and create a composite of another composite. So it's another little sort of amalgamation of the images. And I'm going to take the blue line from the sun VPEG and click it into the composite. I'm going to do the same thing with the facial features. And then I'm going to plug the entire composite, which I'm going to rename rigging. And I'm going to plug that into, just do that there, the very top of the composite there. And then they reappear, see? Now, this composite I want to be a flat element, 2D, and I want it to always be at the front. So we'll do that. Okay, move that over there. So we've got our rigging, and what I want to try and do is to change the display of this. So I've got a display here, and oh no, it's not display I want, is it? It's visibility, that's it. And I'm just going to hold down Option or Alt, so it automatically clicks in, you see, and that way it's in between the rigging composite and the overall composite of the piece we're working on. I'm going to click it there, and I'm going to turn off soft render. And what that does is that it displays in our preview window here, but it won't display when we render it out. So if I show you a preview of what we're going to work on, the pink stuff, the ugly pink stuff, which is only used for our sort of help, disappears. So there you are, you see. And the jagged edges clean up as well, because this is the software render. It's not the sort of quick moving around render that we've got here. So now we've got that, I want to create a system whereby moving bits and pieces around move other bits and pieces around in a particular way, because we've got this sort of flat hierarchical system going on, but I want to be a bit clever. Now I'm going to keep the top view visible because that's important to demonstrate this technique. It's a technique which I'm still working on, but it does at least show you quite advanced areas of how this program can work. So I'm going to select the entire sun, and I'm going to click create keyframe, and what that does, it creates a keyframe for every single part of this character. So keyframe there, keyframe there, keyframe there. And you'll notice, because of what I did earlier, do you remember ages ago when I selected all the drawings and I went to this window and I said do not use animation tools to animate these, only using the pegs to use the embedded pivot. What that's done is allowed me to move elements around and only create a keyframe on... Oh, that's interesting. I obviously did that wrong. Okay. Well, we'll demonstrate how to rectify in a second. But what it should do is separate the keyframe information to the pegs, and the drawing should be left alone. But what we've got here is this rather ugly bit here, where the drawing and the peg, the drawing and the keyframe are sort of simultaneously happening. We don't want that. We want to keep it separating, because that way we can manipulate the animation at a later stage easier. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of that, but you see we can't get rid of it here because I've disabled being able to animate it using animation tools. So I've got to go into the node view, click this little yellow thing here on the relevant bit, and say no, I don't, ignore that. Animate using animation tools, and I'll turn that on briefly. And now I'll be able to turn off keyframe there, and it disappears because I'm now able to do that. And then I can click that, turn that off, and then that'll keep things nice and clean when I move things around later. It won't create a keyframe on that element. It'll just create a keyframe on the peg of the element. So it's separating the information for easier manipulation. You'll see what I mean in a minute. The more you do, the more you see. It's just easier to get your head around. So let's extend that to frame 10, and let's right click, extend exposure, and that way the drawing information carries on from there to there. Now, by default, I have stop motion keyframe creation on by going to the preferences and turning that on. By default, it's actually set to motion keyframes, which I find confusing as a default. You'll see what I mean. If I create a keyframe there and then sort of click anywhere in between and make a motion keyframe, if I were to then go here and move one of these elements along, it does that. You see, it sort of fills in the gaps. If I do that and move it over here, it just clicks from one to the other. You see what I mean? So I prefer motion keyframes to start with, and then if I want to change the way they behave, click that over, because otherwise it's very confusing saying I didn't move that there, and we didn't know, the computer did that for you. So let's leave it at that for the moment. Now the first thing I'm going to explain is cutting. And what that means is that one element cuts another, and that's quite useful for eyes. So let's go into the eye. Come on. And we have a look at this. What we want is the eye to cut the pupil. So there used to be a really confusing bit where we used to use the cutter before. We used to take this node in and would cut using the information, and you don't have to do it quite that much now, though it's useful for some things. All you do is you drag the drawing information into this bit, and then it's saying wherever the eye is, the pupil is allowed to be. Beyond that, it's not. So when I select the pupil, if I move the pupil outside of the area of the eye, you get that. Now you get this weird thing, which you might want, where the pupil cuts into the line art of the image, and that isn't desirable. Using this, let's just make that bigger. In the drawing layer, you've got these different options. So imagine each layer has its own sub-layers. So we have the overlay art, the line art, the colour art, and the underlay art. And when I press this, it shows all four at the same time. At the moment, I've filled in the eye on the line art layer, so there's no sort of sub-layer to sandwich information between. I'm going to select the colour here, and I'm going to cut it. So now we've just got the line. So if I go back to the camera, you'll notice now that you've got this sort of ring, really, with no pupil, it looks like. The pupil is there, but the cutting only shows stuff where they overlap. It doesn't show sort of transparent information. So the only way I'd be able to see that pupil is if I were to move it using the arrow keys here. You see what I mean? Now what we want to try and do is have a white layer where the blue bit shows and the black bit covers over the blue bit of the eye. So what we do is we go to the colour art layer or the underlay layer, so long as the bit that we're making the sort of white bit is underneath the black bit. Any order will do with this. So we're in the colour layer and I will paste that information there. So when I press the eyeball, it shows how it will end up looking. Now when we go back here, we've still got that problem because we haven't said yet which bit we want to cut and which bit we want over the top of this blue eye. So I'll just turn off show strokes, by the way. That turns on by default to show you differences between things. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go here and I'm going to say line art. Yeah, line art. And what this will do is it will take the line art from the eye and separate it out. So actually that's not what I want at all. Sorry. Let's do colour art. Colour art. There we go. Lovely. Right. So what this will do is it'll separate out the colour art layer, which is this bit, from the line art. And so therefore I want the colour art bit to cut the pupil. So I'll take that and I'll cut the pupil there. Now at the moment it's cutting it in a really ugly way, because if you look here, let's just zoom out a bit, whoops, there we are. If we look and we turn on show strokes, you'll notice that the colour art layer cuts in this sort of middle bit, which we don't want, because that's where the cutting's happening. So it sort of cuts halfway through the eye. We want to have that line art going over the top beautifully of the blue eye. So one way we can do this is if we turn this off entirely. So we've just got the cutting mechanism of the colour art. Actually, no, that's not quite true. Let's leave that on. But we want the line art to go over the top. All we do is select line art here. So now we've separated it out as well. And actually, no, that's not quite right. Turn that off. That's right. Sorry, turn that off. We go to pupil here. We take the colour art and we put that behind the pupil as well. So we're using the colour art of the eye and we're saying it cuts and it's also behind the pupil. And the line art is in front of the pupil. Let's just get the pupil up there and then we can see. If I put that in front and then we've got our eye. Now it's a bit of a fiddle to get your head around this. Once you get the technique, it is easy to understand, but it is a little bit of a junction box going on here. So let's go through it one stage at a time. We've got the eye. Let's just zoom in a bit here. And I'll put that there. That's it. So we've got our eye, whose colour art information and line art information has been separated. The line art goes ahead of the pupil, the colour art goes behind the pupil, and the pupil is cut by the colour art part of the eye. So that's how it's going to be worked, all right? It's only things that you want to cut that work in this sort of weird way. And then you want the entire eye to be behind the nose. So where's the nose? Yeah. Where did I put the nose? The nose. So the eye, the line art is the first bit of it. So I put the nose in front of that, and then we've got that nice thing there. And the mouth will need to come in front of the eye. So again, like that. There we go, and we've got that nice chunk. So now if I move things around, I'll just put that back to how it was. So now if I move the eye around, we've got this nice effect. Why is the box so big? let's have a look. I wonder why. There's no reason for it to be like that at all. Is there some sort of random artifact that's catching on it? I don't know why. I honestly don't know why the eye is so big, the pupil is so big, because it should be like that. I don't know. Hang on, let's just... That is very strange, that. Don't get it. Hang on, let's have a look. What's being selected there? Oh, I suppose it's being cut by the whole eye. Yeah, so I see. So you notice the cutter there is changing the bounding box of the eye completely. There we go. So yeah, every time I click back on it, that's saying the bounding box. So it's just something you're going to have to get used to. We'll do the same thing with the other eye, just so that we know what we're doing. So the first thing we need to do is separate the information in the eye. So I'll cut that, go to the colour art, paste it there. So they're now separated within the information now. So then I take in the node library, colour art node and the line art node and the colour art node. There we go. Plug them in. And then using the colour art node, I will cut the pupil. And using the line art node, if we turn that off, I'll put the colour art behind the pupil and the line art in front of the pupil. And then the nose will have to be in front of everything again. And the mouth will have to be in front of that. There we go. So that wasn't too bad. Once you get the hang of it, you know what you're doing, but it is initially a bit of a fiddle. It does look like a mess, but it's, you know, you get used to it. And these certainly help just to know where things are, you know, clumped together. It just helps things a bit. So we've got our little mechanism here now where we can manipulate the eyes and they don't leave the eyeball, which is really handy, especially if you're blinking. If you have blinks and you have a blink and you want to put that inside the eye, you just create another drawing layer and call it a blink, and then you can move that up and down or create different animated stages, and of course they wouldn't leave the confines of the colour art layer, you see. So that's one way of doing it. Now, what I'm going to show you is quite fun. This is going to be a deformer. So we're going to do a deformer on the eyebrow. So all you do to create a deformer, i.e. sort of bones really, is to select the hammer and spanner tool, go to tool properties and make sure that this symbol is selected. This automatically creates whatever bone type you're creating. And from the very base, because the base is the start, I'm going to just move it to there, and then from the end I'm going to move it to there. And then we've got this sort of manipulating thing. We can create as many stages as we like. We always drag towards the last point to create this curvy thing. But I don't want to create this massive, great snake. I just want to do 2 points. And then I can select with the animation tool and bend it around, you see? Making it all puzzled. There you are. I'll do the same thing with this one. There we go. Just move, before I come out of changing mode, I'll just move things around. There we go. And I've got my little incredulous sun. And the great thing about this is that I can, if I'm not happy with the way that the structure of that works, I can go in again and change it, you see. So it's not set in stone. Of course, that will affect any animation you've done. That's the thing. So it's important to get this right before you start animating. Now, the only problem with deformers is that it changes the pivot point back to some random thing. So if you wanted to sort of rotate that without using deformers, it's kind of doing it in the wrong place. So what you want to do is, you would think, go there, wouldn't you? But no, the pivot point is in that same place. Craziness, what's going on? Well, what you do is you use this instead. I don't know why, but for some reason, that's what they've decided to do. And you drag the pivot point. You don't press, because that doesn't make any sense either. You have to drag to make this work. You drag it to the place, and then it'll be okay again. It makes no sense, but for some reason this is a thing. So there. So anytime you use a deformer, you have to do this little dance. So anyway, there we go. We've got our pivots in place. It's all looking very, very nice indeed. Now, magic time, as if we haven't had already enough magic. Actually, there's one other thing I will show before we get into the magic side. Incidentally, I'll just get rid of that peg. There we go. And I've done that, you see, created a keyframe because I'd created those deformers. They hadn't got a keyframe of their own. That's the reason why they snapped back to their original default positions, because I was manipulating that keyframe. Anyway, let's go here, and I want to create another mouth position. Now, if we have a look at the mouth layer here, I can do it on any of these, but I could do it on that, doesn't matter. I create a new drawing. I could create an empty drawing, but A, I've got to draw everything in again, and B, if you notice here, the pivot changes, because each drawing has its own unique pivot. The peg is also its own thing, but the peg for each drawing is different. For reasons which I won't go into now. It's not relevant to this particular tutorial, but it's a useful thing, but you have to be wary of it. So I don't really want to do that because I want to just manipulate the original drawing I have rather than do that. So I'll undo that. And I'll select the mouth again, and I'll say duplicate drawing. So that way it's created a new drawing, mouth 2, and it's exactly the same as the original one, except it's a new drawing in inverted commas. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw using that and colour of sunline, and I'm just going to do that. All right. Now this is not good animation. But that's not the point. And I'll just say to make sure you join up a couple of bits. Come on, come on. Really? Oh. Come on. We're in the mouth layer. Oh. It's because I've selected the colour art when I've drawn everything on the line art layer. What I'll do, select all of this using the black selector, sorry. Cut, line art, paste. Now I should be able to fill it in. There we go. I'll just turn that down because there was a little bit of an artifact there. Still is. Still is. That annoys me, that little dot. Come on. There we go. There you go, that'll do. Right. So we've got our lip sync here. Me, 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 me. Now, obviously, you would animate this properly, but this is just to demonstrate the differences. Now, I'm going to create one more as well. Another keeper's substitution by pressing that. And, I don't know, I'll manipulate it. So I'll just pull these elements down a little bit more using the, what do they call it? The contour editor tool. So now we've got that sort of thing going on. And I could, if I wanted to, manipulate these bits so it just tucks in a bit, maybe. Like that. Meh, meh, meh. So at any stage we can, using either this slider or using hotkeys, which I use, select different mouth positions. So imagine he's talking. Meh, 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 meh. I'm very hot. Yes, that's funnily enough. Now, I'm very hot and mad and slightly drawn by John Kay. We dare not speak his name. Right. Let's assume that this is our animation. Me, 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 me. And we want to make a head turn. So let's collapse all these elements up now. Position 1, position 2, keyframe. Move it over. And then we just do that. And we've got a beautiful head turn, haven't we? Haven't we, kids? What you would do is you would manipulate that and perhaps squish it a bit and maybe move the end eye a bit like that. So you get some sense of it turning. And move that over, and in fact we'll probably put that right on the front. Now you notice that that's slightly tucked behind the mouth there, which isn't very nice. So what we want to do is move that forwards towards us in Z space. So what we do is we hold down Option or Alt, and using the arrow keys, I think it's down to get it towards us, we press. And by holding that, we're actually able to get it towards us and away from us. Up and down, up and down. See, like that. So now we've got our little animation. Isn't that beautiful? And let's manipulate that and move that down and move that up and whatever. What a lovely piece of beautiful hand animated rubbish this is. Now this isn't the magic thing, though it tells you how the basic principles of animation work in this wonderful program. Let's move that and let's move it up to here and move it up to there. There we go. And let's say in the midpoint I wanted to move the entire sun down, so move it there and then up there obviously, so we got this sort of effect. So playback. Lovely stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. If I move it over there. It's ugly as sin, but you get the idea. This is not how to animate, by the way. I'll do a tutorial that's much more creative about the mechanics of the art of animation. This is just about how to operate Harmony Premium. So we've got our wonderful piece of Disney quality animation here. Now here's an interesting little technique. Let's get rid of that keyframe, and I'm going to create another keyframe here. No, not yet. No, bad Ollie. Smack hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the top view here and the perspective view here. Now if I zoom out the perspective view, this is real 3D space in the computer. And using now I can never remember, every single time I forget. Yeah, Command and Option on a Mac, or Control and Alt on a PC, or I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, this is the world of 3D. And at the moment you're looking at a 2D plane essentially. Tiny little bit difference. The nose is actually slightly ahead of the rest of the elements. If we zoomed in and use a microscope, we'd be able to see a tiny little difference. But for all intents and purposes, it's a flat thing with a 3D sort of background kind of in the background. Now, because it is kind of real 3D, we can do fun things like, if I say to this, this master peg here, in the layer properties, transform enable 3D, we suddenly get this. And what that allows us to do when I select the master peg is manipulate this part in 3 dimensions. So if I'm having a look round now, it's slightly off. And when I look through the camera view, it's also slightly off. You get this sort of 3D effect, isn't it marvellous? Now, that in itself is marvellous, but we can go one better than that and do something quite fun and clever and interesting. Let's go back to the top view again, and let's select each facial element and do something interesting. So We've established that the nose is ahead of everything because it's the most protruding part of any face. But what if we say, now using this allows us to move things forwards and backwards in the z-axis, towards and away, without changing its size. So I'm just going to move that towards the camera. The camera's here, by the way, that's the field of vision. And this line represents all the stuff here, except for this line, which is the nose now. I'm going to move the nose a bit further forward, and I'm going to move the mouth a little further forward too. Come on, select that, thank you. Like that. And I'm going to move the facial features generally further forward. Now, again, it's not obvious on here because they're not changing size with this special thing. Now, with the facial features pivot, I'm going to change the pivot for this particular thing by clicking there and moving the pivot behind. Oh, I can't do it that, I have to use that. Moving the pivot behind the elements. I've got to make that a 3D element, the facial features peg. And in the top view, I'm going to move the pivot back to about there. So imagine that's where the sphere is shown, and this is the pivot of the facial features, because that's what I'm currently selected. Now, if I select that and I move them around, you get this weird effect where it kind of looks as if there's actually a 3D effect going on. Isn't that strange? It's a very, very odd effect, and you can build on it. Let's do it up as well, look, up and down. Now, at the moment it's clipping. If I do that, it's clipping, you see, because if we go to the perspective view and we have a look around what's happening here, you'll see that when I do that and I have a look around, it's actually cutting through the body of the main body, if you like. And we don't want that to happen. We want this to kind of be an independent, we want it to move with the sun, but we want it to be independent of it as well. There is a way to do this. If we go to the node view, and I go to the node library and I create another composite, and I say I want this one to be two-dimensional. So the stuff in it's 3D, but the end result is two-dimensional. So it's like a virtual 3D canvas on a flat piece of paper. This will allow us to maneuver things within this piece of paper, but not clip, because it's 3D within this piece of paper, not within the 3D space of the other stuff. Is that confusing? I would be very surprised if it isn't. So let's call this face comp. And that will be right on the top of everything. And I will plug in everything from every facial feature into this face composite. So there, and the pupil, and the eyebrow, and the line art, and I want to do it in the same order. Now, whether or not I am or not, I don't know yet. I'm just plugging it all in willy-nilly. And if I just show you what's going on, that's the facial composite. I think that's everything. Oh, the nose, sorry. Which goes to the front, and the mouth, which goes to the front as well. There we are, marvellous. Now, it's not quite right because the IA, the ordering of things isn't quite right. Colour art. Oh no, it's just not plugged in. Hang on. Pupil A, it's got to go behind pupil A. There we go, lovely. Right. So we've got everything there, and this is a lot simpler to understand now, the end composite. So the face is on top of the other stuff. So now, if I move things around in the perspective view, you'll still get the clipping, because ugly, ugly. Now you might still get it in the camera view. No, you don't. The only reason I said I might get it is because if we look here, the Z axis output, because it's got to have some kind of relation to the world that it exists in this view, if you know. So what it's using as its sort of anchor point into this world is the nose. So long as the nose is in front of the sun, we're okay. So let's just manipulate that again and we'll see what I mean. So the nose is always in front until it gets to that point, and then clipping will occur. So if I go back to the camera, it's not very clear from that angle, but if I were to move the nose behind, let's do that in fact. Clipping there, no, oh, okay, clipping there, okay. Blech. Ah, okay, not leftmost, so I should have said frontmost. There we go, right. Clipping until that, and then it won't appear here. Frontmost meaning the most front thing in the perspective view, you see, so the front being this side because that's where the camera is. Let's just move that out of the way, I can't see what I'm doing. However, we can say leftmost meaning this part, so the leftmost bit in this composite is the mouth because we've connected it there, so wherever the mouth is, whatever. We could create a visual peg and move it over here that's not movable, and that way it's always in front, but for now I think we'll just leave it at that, because otherwise it's blinding people with science. But the idea is that you get this marvellous weird 3D effect where the character is able to move and do all sorts of fun things, and it's quite weird, isn't it? Now the other thing I wouldn't mind doing to get it right is to move everything just so that the roll of the eyes is right. There we go. It's a weird effect. You might want to sort of fill that so you get a little front lip. In fact, let's do that. Obviously for the rest of it we won't get that, but for the first frame we will. If I select the paintbrush tool, colour will be the sun's main body of colour, which I think is that, and then using this brush, draw behind tool, I can go into the drawing layer. Can't paint on it once it's doing 3D because it doesn't understand how it works, but in the drawing layer I can, and I can just paint this like that, so you get this sort of muzzle. There, and then we've got that, and then I'll have to just, now what's going on here, whoopsie daisy, the mouth is on top, so I've got to just move that so the nose is actually on top. There we go. And then we've got this lovely weird effect. Now obviously it's a bit rough around the edges, you would have to sort of create all sorts of cutters and weird things to get that sort of cheek thing going on once it moves beyond the space of the sun. But as a starting go at how this program can work, that's incredibly advanced, clever stuff. You can manipulate the deformers and do all sorts of fun things there, and it's all good quality wholesome fun, you see. And you could have that as position 1, that's your position, whoops, that is your position 2 when you get there eventually one day. And then just put in a motion keyframe, motion tween. Just move that so it's not quite, whoops, not quite as alarming. Move that over there. And then move the entire sun. So starting position, end position. And there we have a very odd bit of animation which fakes a 3D effect. Now you could, if you wanted to as well, alter this. So I'm going to turn off animate mode, so we're just manipulating each individual bit permanently in its relative spaces. So it's not animating it, it's just saying this will forever be... Oh, let me show you. Let me go here. Now, at the moment, these eyes are skewed in this way. If I just... If I... let me see, how do I get back to unaffected stuff? Oh, it's using that, probably. Enable 3D, and now I can change it in the top view, hopefully. Come on, come on. Maybe I have to do... Right, I'd selected the wrong thing. Because I'm manipulating the peg and not the drawing. I should have selected that bit, sorry, and selected 3D. There we go. Same with that one. So you have to change this bit. There we go. Now that I've got it, you'll see what I was trying to do in the first place. I want to try and turn the eye... Come on now. Oh, really? Okay, so it only allows it to animate. Okay, well, this isn't quite what you're supposed to do, but alright. I just want to see if this works now. Click the eye there. So it kind of creates a sphere effect. There we go, see? It's not quite right, because the angle's a bit too harsh. This is something I should have set up right at the very beginning. That's better. Yeah. So there we go. Sorry about the slightly wonky ending there, but you get the idea with the rest of it, that you've got this ability to do this incredibly advanced stuff relatively simply. Now, obviously, you wouldn't animate things quite like this, but the ability to tweak things after they're animated is pretty good. And to make changes and alter things is incredibly useful. And I think that's one of the reasons why I absolutely adore Toon Boom, because it does allow me great sense of creative advantage. It just gives me all sorts of options, and I love that. Let's just make that twist round as well. Frame, frame. Then we got that. There we go. Even nicer. Look. Twiddly, 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 twiddly. I'm going to stop now because this is getting silly. But I hope you enjoyed this little perambulation around Toon Boom. There are a lot of different techniques which I covered in this. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and please subscribe and join Patreon for actual animations that I want to create for this channel and further tutorials. Bye-bye.